This could be it, Packers fans. The Packers and the Dolphins will meet on Christmas Day with huge implications for this Green Bay team. Can the Packers play well enough to beat a good Dolphins team that also needs to win this game for their playoff chances? Welcome to the Packer Mentality Podcast. My name is Patrick Corrigan and I'm your host. You can find and follow me on Twitter at Packer Mentality. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button below. And as always, thank you so much for joining me. Now, you may notice different surroundings. My family is visiting family for the holidays. So different setup, different surroundings, a bit of a temporary setup as far as getting this recorded, but we'll make it work. Now, not to be overly dramatic, but this game will show us if this Packers team can make the playoffs or deserves to make the playoffs. And honestly, could be the straw that breaks the camel's back on whether Joe Barry continues as defensive coordinator for even the rest of the season and definitely for next season. This Miami offense, it's pretty good and it's become more balanced in recent weeks. Uses the Shanahan family tree, lots of motion, lots of pre-snap shifts, going to try and test and confuse our defenders, especially the young guys, Quay Walker. Going to see a lot going on in the backfield. He will need to have good discipline. The running game is going to feature a player out of Packers nightmares from years past, Raheem Mostert, who ran all over this Green Bay team when he was with the 49ers, had over 130 yards rushing last week against a good Bills rushing defense. Now, this defensive line, if the Dolphins are going to try and run the ball, this defensive line needs to play a lot better. Up until this point, unless we're playing a really weak running team with a bad offensive line, for the most part, this defensive line has not been winning. They have been out of position. They are not getting off blocks. I've mentioned all this stuff before. Linebackers not filling gaps or not doing it quickly enough. Just a recipe for disaster, especially when they do not have to run. This Miami passing game features two of the fastest and might even be the best wide receiver group or wide receiver duo in the league. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Unbelievable speed from these two guys, and they do run routes, not just straight down the field all the time. It's going to be very difficult for our secondary to keep these guys in front of them. They will need to be much better. They cannot have communication errors. They cannot have, lapses in coverage. They will need to react quickly and decisively to stay with these guys, which hasn't happened for much of the season with wide receivers. Now, aside from Jair Alexander, I don't think any of our defensive backs are fast enough to run with these guys. So, going to need to do the best we can. Now, I love Rasul Douglas. I think he's a good cornerback. This is not a good matchup for him. Could be if Joe Barry's thinking that he switches Keyshawn Nixon and Rasul Douglas, moves Keyshawn out to match up against whoever Jair isn't covering, which would probably Jalen Waddle. But we'll see. But again, it's going to be very difficult for anybody to run with these guys. They are going to need help from whoever's playing safety, who also uh, needs to play better than we've seen over the most of the season. Now, the best way for the Packers to win is to keep the ball away from the Miami offense. So the Packers offense, we need the running game again this week. This is not a great Miami defense, especially in the secondary. They have lots of new, inexperienced faces. They have been decimated by injuries. They still have Xavier Howard, though, so at least one of their corners is actually very good. They will most likely play very soft, as they have been in previous weeks. They've been playing soft to avoid chunk plays from opposing offenses. They're playing very conservative. That means Romeo Dobbs running routes underneath, Alan Lazard running routes underneath, Randall Cobb running routes underneath. And it's possible that Xavier Howard might be trailing Christian Watson, so it might be difficult for him for much of the game. But I'm not sure even Xavier Howard can keep up with Christian Watson, either speed-wise, or I believe Christian also has a pretty good height advantage over Xavier Howard. So definitely still opportunities in the passing game, and I do expect, or we should hope for and expect, a good game from Aaron Rodgers and this passing attack. As I said, this is going to be about keeping the ball away from the Miami offense, so expect Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon to see the ball a lot as well. The 6, 7, 8, 9 play drives that we saw last week against the Rams, we need to see that again this week. It will be more difficult. This is a much better team than the Rams. They are not quite as decimated. They're not quite as decimated as the Rams team was. Now, with all that being said, this is going to be a very tough task for the Packers team. The road to the playoffs most scenarios require the Packers to win their final 3 games. So they need to win on Christmas, and they need to beat the Vikings and beat the Lions. Along with that, the most likely scenario would involve Seattle needs to lose 1 game, which will probably happen this weekend when they play the Chiefs. Unlikely that the Seahawks can beat the Chiefs. That's just a tall task for that team. The other part of that equation is the Washington Commanders need to lose 2 of their last 3. The Commanders play the 49ers this week, which is most likely a loss for them. And then they play the Browns, which could be a loss with Deshaun Watson back at quarterback. And then they end the season against the Dallas Cowboys, also could be a loss. So the other side of the equation from what the Packers need to do still looks pretty good. But this is the week that most likely, or at least could, trip them up. We'll find out. We'll know Christmas Day. I'll be back with a video. Probably will be uploaded on Monday with my gut reaction. I don't think I'm going to do it on Christmas Day, but we'll see. In the meantime, I hope everyone has a very safe travels to wherever you're spending Christmas. Have a very Merry Christmas to you and your families. Be safe, be kind, and as always, go Pack Go.